In the last video on Bobby Fischer's games, I looked at a splendid King's Indian attack that he played against Myagmasuren, and this was the end of the game. Myagmasuren played Rook A7 to defend along the 7th rank, and then there followed this beautiful move, Bishop G2, and Black has no defense against the mate. The game ended like this: Queen H6, threatening Queen G7 mate, and then the Queen sacrifice, Queen takes H7, followed by Bishop E4 mate. Now, if we come back to this position, I posed the question at the end of the last video: why didn't Black play Rook C7? Wouldn't this be a better defense? Because if White tries Bishop G2 here, then Bishop B7 can be played. It doesn't block the Rook on the 7th rank, and Bishop B7 would prevent White's Bishop reaching E4. So that was my puzzle for you. How does White win from this position? Well, there is a win. It's very attractive. Hope you didn't use computers, but White can play Bishop G4. An equally subtle move, and well, let's Black is completely lost, but let's try this move. Queen H6, threatening mate, and Black can make a queen if he wants to, but well, let's see it in action. So we'll take this, and we don't need to come back and take. We can simply play king here, and it all reaches the same thing. Black has to defend against the mate on G7, Queen F8, and once again we sacrifice the queen. It has to be taken. Pawn takes, double discovered check. So if the king goes back, Rook H8 mate, the king comes here, and now Bishop H5. This is a forced checkmate. If the king steps up, Rook F4. King comes to H6, then Bishop F7 is mate. That's very nice. And if the king comes back, this is great because this is an echo of the game. White plays Bishop F3 check, and if the queen interposes, then we have Bishop E4 check, and Rook takes, and there's no decent defense to Rook H8 mate. Very attractive indeed. I mean, there are other variations, but it's all completely lost for Black. So there you go. So I was looking through some other games of Fischer's in the King's Indian attack, and this one caught my eye. I thought this was very nice. So slightly different pawn structure. This was played against Oscar Panno in Buenos Aires in 1970. So you can see that Fischer has got the pawn to E5, but this is very much like a French defense with this locked pawn structure. But it came from a King's Indian attack. And there's an open file, so Black has some counterplay on the queen side, or it can keep White busy on the queen side. But Fischer, you can see, has started an attack with H4. And he played Bishop H6 to weaken those dark squares. And Panno brought the knight to D7 to start to cover the dark squares. And now Queen G5, threatening the knight. And perhaps looking to exchange and play the knight into H5. So Panno exchanged rooks and then exchanged on H6. And he brought the next rook over to exchange. So a lot of material has been exchanged off the board, which of course makes it more difficult for Fischer to attack. However, these weakened dark squares somehow attract White's pieces, draws them to the king side like a magnet, and this is a very unpleasant position for Black to defend. So h5 played, and one of the ideas is that if, well, let's say black brings the knight back to f8 to defend here, then white will just nudge the queen back, claiming this diagonal, and then with the idea of h6, and this looks very nasty. Therefore, Panno played the queen back to d8 to prevent queen g5. Knight came to g5, threatening queen h7, so that was defended by the knight. And this is the next move of white's, is the one that really caught my eye. It looks as though black is holding firm in this position, but Fischer has spotted a beautiful move, and there's an echo of the previous game that we just looked at. Fischer played bishop e4, so once again using this e4 square to make the breakthrough. If the bishop is taken, then the knight comes into f6, and that is the end of that. So Panno played queen e7. I mean, there's no decent defence now. And now we can see the point of bringing the bishop to this diagonal, that Fischer is actually able to make a breakthrough on the king side. So he exchanged, took on h7 and took on g6, and the bishop breaks through, and these pieces simply can't contribute to the defence. For example, well, if queen g7, then we can play bishop takes and queen takes, and at the very least we pick up the knight on c8. Knight g5 played, knight h5, this one comes into f6, that's where it's been aiming for a long time, and just a few little checks. Took on g6, but now knight f6 is forcing mate, and here black resigned. Well, that's obviously checkmate. So there we go. Watch out for that e4 square, beautiful move. Oops, trying to highlight it. Bishop e4 for white, and that enabled Fischer to make the final breakthrough.